She stood at the edge of the dusty ranch road as the sun bled red into the Wild West horizon, her dress torn, her hands shaking, and her eyes filled with the kind of fear that only comes from having nowhere left to go. When she finally gathered the courage to ask the rancher one simple question, "Sir, where would I stay for the night?" She never imagined his answer would change the course of her entire life. What he said next didn't just give her shelter, it gave her something she thought she had lost forever. If you love emotional Wild West stories that touch the soul, make sure to like this video and subscribe to the channel right now, because this story will stay with you long after it ends. The wind swept across the plains like a whisper from the past as Clara stood frozen near the split rail fence, watching the rancher dismount his horse with the slow confidence of a man who had survived both men and nature. His name was Eli Walker, a hardened rancher with a weather-beaten face and eyes that carried more sorrow than words ever could, and he wasn't expecting company that evening, especially not a young woman who looked like she'd walked straight out of tragedy itself. Clara's boots were worn through, her hair tangled with dust and tears, and the bruise on her cheek told a story she wasn't ready to speak aloud. She had fled from a mining town that swallowed women whole, promises of work turning into cruelty, kindness turning into chains, and every mile she walked away from it felt heavier than the last. When she reached Eli's ranch, she had already decided she'd rather die under the open sky than go back, but fear has a way of making even the strongest knees tremble. Eli noticed the way she flinched when he spoke, the way her eyes darted like a trapped animal's, and though he'd sworn years ago never to invite trouble into his quiet life again, something in her silence reminded him of his late wife, buried on the hill behind the barn. Clara finally spoke, her voice barely louder than the wind, explaining she had nowhere to go and no one left to ask, and when the words, "I don't need much, just a place to sleep," slipped out, they broke something open inside him that had been sealed for years. He studied her for a long moment, the sky darkening behind her, knowing full well that in the Wild West, offering shelter could mean inviting danger, lies, or worse. But turning her away would mean condemning her to a night that could end her life. As the first stars appeared, Clara swallowed hard and asked the question that had haunted her for miles, the question that held her fate in its fragile balance. "Sir, where would I stay for the night?" Eli didn't answer right away, and the silence stretched so long Clara thought she already knew the outcome, her heart sinking as memories of slammed doors and cruel laughter echoed in her mind. But then the rancher finally spoke in a low, steady voice that carried no judgment, no threat, only resolve. He told her she could stay in the small cabin near the barn, the one that hadn't been used since Winter took his wife away, and the moment those words landed, Clara felt her legs nearly give out. Not from weakness, but from relief so overwhelming it felt painful. He didn't ask for payment, didn't ask for her story, didn't demand anything in return, and that kindness frightened her more than cruelty ever had, because she had learned that nothing in life came free. As he handed her a lantern and a blanket, he added something unexpected, "No one will touch you here. Not tonight. Not ever." Those words struck her deeper than he could have known, because no man had ever promised her safety without expecting something in return. That night, Clara sat alone in the quiet cabin, staring at the wooden walls as if they might vanish, half expecting the door to burst open and prove that hope was just another lie, but it never did. Outside, Eli sat on the porch long after dark, rifle across his knees, guarding a woman he barely knew because something inside him told him this was a test. Not of courage, but of humanity. As days passed, Clara helped with chores, cooked meals, and slowly allowed herself to breathe again, while Eli watched her regain pieces of herself she thought were lost forever. The ranch, once a place of silence and ghosts, began to feel alive again, and though neither spoke of the pain they carried, it lingered between them like a shared understanding. But the Wild West never lets peace come without a price, and when riders from Clara's past were spotted near the ranch, the fragile safety she'd found was about to be tested in ways neither of them were prepared for. The sound of hooves at dawn shattered the calm like a gunshot, and Clara knew before Eli even reached for his rifle that the men she'd fled had found her, their shadows stretching across the land like the past refusing to stay buried. Fear wrapped around her heart as memories of chains and threats flooded back. But this time, something was different. She wasn't alone. Eli stood between her and the riders without hesitation, his voice firm as stone as he told them she was under his protection and that they would leave his land immediately. Laughter followed, cruel and mocking, as one of the men reminded Eli that in this world, women like Clara didn't belong to anyone unless claimed, and for a split second, Clara expected Eli to step aside, to choose safety over justice like so many had before. Instead, he lifted his rifle and spoke words that would echo in her soul forever. She belongs to herself, and that's enough. The standoff that followed was tense and dangerous, but Eli's reputation as a man who didn't bluff carried weight, and eventually the riders turned back, leaving dust and silence in their wake. Clara collapsed to her knees, shaking, as the reality of what he'd risked finally hit her. He had been willing to die to protect someone the world had already written off. In that moment, the ranch wasn't just a place to stay, it was home, and Eli wasn't just a stranger, he was proof that kindness could still exist in a brutal land. As the days turned into weeks, Clara found strength she didn't know she had, learning to ride, to laugh, and to dream again, while Eli learned that love didn't always arrive loudly. It sometimes came quietly, asking only for a place to stay. Months later, Clara stood on the same road where she had once asked her question, only now the sun rose instead of setting, and the fear that once defined her had been replaced by something steadier. Hope. She no longer wondered where she'd sleep at night, because she had built a life on that ranch, one rooted in trust, dignity, and the kind of love that doesn't demand but protects. Eli never claimed her, never owned her, but stood beside her as an equal, and in doing so, gave her back her freedom along with her future. When Clara finally asked him why he had taken her in that first night, why he had answered her question the way he did, Eli simply said, "Because everyone deserves one place in this world where they're safe." And with that, the broken girl who once feared the night became a woman who no longer ran from it. If this story touched your heart, don't forget to like this video and subscribe to the channel for more powerful, emotional Wild West stories that remind us kindness can change a life forever.